Hi, in this video, which is a short video and part of a series of short videos, I'm going to walk you through some AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam questions, with the idea being that it gives you an insight into my thought process and the sort of logic that I use to try and make sure that I arrive at the correct answer. So we're just going to go through about 5 questions in each video. So let's get started. So this first question asks, a company is planning to migrate some resources into the cloud. What factors need to be considered when determining the cost of the AWS cloud? Right, so this is all about cost, and we've got to choose 2 answers from 5. So with the Cloud Practitioner exam, you have 2 question formats. One is multiple choice, where you have 4 answers and 1's correct, and the other is known as multiple selection, where you have 2 correct answers out of 5 options. So in this case, we need to think of 2 correct answers. So what is going to cost us money when we move into the AWS cloud? So let's look at the first one, the number of VPCs created. Well, you don't actually pay for VPCs, so there's no cost associated with them. You can create many VPCs in your account. The number of servers migrated into EC2. Well, with EC2, you do pay because you're paying for the instances. So you choose an EC2 instance type, and then you pay for the amount of time that you're running that EC2 instance. And then there are various pricing models for getting different kinds of discounts. So I believe that's a correct answer, so I'm going to select that one. The number of IAM users created. So IAM is the Identity and Access Management Service, and you create your user accounts in there, your groups, your roles, and your policies. And it doesn't cost you anything, so you can create lots of users, thousands of users, and it's not actually going to cost you any money. So that's not a factor for cost in the cloud. The next one is the amount of egress data per month. So egress means data going out of the cloud, whereas ingress would mean data that you're uploading into the cloud. So you never pay for data that you upload to AWS, but in most cases you do pay for the data that you send out of AWS. So the amount of egress data per month is a factor in terms of cost. And like I said, for ingress you don't pay. So these are the 2 correct answers. Let's click on check. And sure enough, those are the correct answers. And we've got a bit of an explanation here. So as it says in the explanation, remember the 3 fundamental drivers of pricing on AWS are compute, storage, and then outbound data transfer. So let's click on next and see our next question. So this one asks, how should an organization deploy an application running on multiple EC2 instances to ensure that a power failure does not cause an application outage? Okay, so we have an application and it's running across multiple EC2 instances. Now, we might be concerned about an outage, so we want high availability. So how can we ensure our application is highly available? Well, first off, it's saying launch your instances in separate regions. Now, while that's true, that imposes some problems because that means that your instances are quite a long way apart. You've got to work out how you can load balance or direct your traffic to those instances. And there are ways. You could use Amazon Route 53, for example. But you can't use an elastic load balancer across regions, so that would make it a bit tricky. Launch the instances into different VPCs. Well, a virtual private cloud is like a private area in which you create your own subnets. But those subnets, which you launch your EC2 instances in, they actually reside on availability zones. So those are the actual sort of data centers where your instance is running. Now, if you have instances in different VPCs, well, firstly, again, you've got some issues with how do you direct traffic to them. But secondly, you've got to think about the fact that they could be sharing the same underlying availability zone. So that doesn't necessarily work. So the key thing for me is availability zones, which the next answer actually mentions. So it's saying launch the EC2 instances into different AZs, availability zones. And that means your instances will be in the same region, but they'll be in different availability zones. Now, each availability zone has its own power sources, its own networking sources, lots of redundancy. So if a power failure happens in an availability zone, it will affect the instances in that AZ, but it won't affect your other instances in another AZ. So to me, that straight away sounds like a good answer, and I'm going to select that one. Next, it mentions launching EC2 instances into edge locations. Well, an edge location is used primarily by CloudFront, which is a content delivery network. So it's where you actually cache content like images and videos. So that's not a place you actually run EC2 instances. So I'm pretty sure that one's wrong as well. So let's go and choose check. And sure enough, that's the correct answer. And we've got lots of information there to do a bit more reading. So let's move on to the next question. So this question says, which of the following security operations tasks must be performed by AWS customers? And again, you've got to choose two. So there's the concept of the AWS shared responsibility model. And that defines what you as a customer of AWS have responsibility for and what AWS have a responsibility for. So primarily the difference is that AWS run the underlying infrastructure. They call it security of the cloud, whereas you're responsible for the services and the data that you have running on AWS, and that's known as security in the cloud. So let's go through these one by one and try and work out which is an AWS responsibility and which is a customer responsibility. So the first one mentions collecting syslog messages from physical firewalls. Well, pretty much any time you hear the word physical, it's very likely to mean that it's an AWS responsibility. Now you can have dedicated instances in your VPC, and that means that you get a server that's dedicated for your use. But still, the underlying physical hardware is not something you manage. So I believe that's an incorrect answer because we're looking for the responsibilities of the customer here. Issuing data center access key cards. Well, I think that talks about people who want to enter the physical data center, maybe to do some maintenance, and they need a key card, some kind of authentication card to get in. Well, again, that's AWS's responsibility. Installing security updates on EC2 instances. Well, that's definitely a customer responsibility. Now, the underlying host, so you've got to bear in mind the difference between sort of patch management of the physical host that the EC2 instance runs on. That's an AWS responsibility. And then the EC2 instance itself. So you might have an instance running Linux or Windows, and you have to patch that operating system and any applications and whatever software you have on top of it. So that's a correct answer in this case because it's a customer responsibility. Enabling multi-factor authentication for privileged users. Well, MFA refers to having a second factor. So the first one is usually a username and a password. So that's something, it's often referred to as something you know. So you have to remember your password. The second factor is what we call something you have. And that's a physical device, or it could be something like the Google Authenticator tool on your phone. And that means that it proves that you actually have that physical token or that physical phone because the tokens that get generated on it are unique. And you have to enter that in. So that proves you remember your password and you've got a physical device that's been assigned to you. Now that's definitely a customer responsibility. So the next one is installing updates on server firmware. So again, as I mentioned, for physical hardware, that's definitely not something you should be doing as a customer. So I believe those are definitely the correct answers. Let's click on check. And sure enough, those are correct. And there we got our explanation. So let's move on to another question. What are two ways that moving to an AWS cloud can benefit an organization? So it's another multiple answer, so a multi-response. Now on the Cloud Practitioner, there are a lot of multiple response questions. When you get to the associate level, you get far fewer, maybe sort of 10 or so from 65 questions, but you get a lot more in the Cloud Practitioner. So what are two ways that you get benefits from moving to AWS? So the first answer is switch to a CapEx model. Well, that means capital expenditure. And that refers to when you purchase things, like you might purchase, like a physical server, and you've got to pay out a load of cash from your pocket. And that's not what you do in the cloud. So you can pay up front for things like reserved instances. But generally, it's what's called an OPEX model, so operational expenditure. And that means you're paying a monthly bill for what you consume rather than a big sort of amount in a single go that you have to pay up front. So that's not a benefit. The next is to increase speed and agility. Well, that sounds very positive to me because you definitely increase speed and agility by moving into the cloud. There's a lot less planning that goes into launching an application on AWS than in the physical world. Now, there's still lots of planning to do, but at least you don't have to order that physical hardware, have it turn up, install the physical hardware, and all that kind of thing. And that's a lot of work and can take many months or weeks or months. And the agility refers to the ability to modify what you're doing very quickly. So in the cloud, because everything is very easy and quick to launch, and you can spin things up and take them down again very quickly. So you've got that agility. So I think that's a good answer, and I'm going to select that as a benefit. Stop guessing about capacity. Well, again, I think this is a really good benefit of the cloud. Now, in the old days, when you bought a server, so you bought a physical server to run an application on, you had to guess how big that server should be. So how much CPU, how much RAM, how much storage space. And the challenge is that you don't want to underdo it, because then your application fails and you look very bad. So often people will over provision. So they'll purchase too much capacity and it goes unused, and that costs money, obviously. So you don't have to do that in the cloud, because you can right size from the outset. So you can have things that elastically scale, and that means you're paying for what you're using. If your application grows, you get a big user base, then it elastically grows. And if another month you find that you don't have many users for some reason, then you decrease your application footprint and pay less. So that's a great benefit of the cloud. Depreciate assets over a longer time frame. Well, no, that's what you would do really with CapEx models, where you depreciate them. So you buy something outright, it's a big expense to your business, and then you depreciate that asset over a period of time, and that's really an accounting thing. That's not a benefit of the cloud. Gain greater control over data center security. Well, it's the opposite. You lose control of the data center security. Of course, the AWS data centers are pretty well secured, so it's not really a big worry, but it's not something you have control over. So that's not a benefit of the cloud. So I believe these are the two correct answers. Let's click on check, and they are. And so let's move on to one more question. This question asks, you need to implement a hosted queue for storing messages in transit between application servers. Which service should you use? So when I hear the word queue, I'm straight away looking at Amazon SQS. So what I'll often do is just go and choose that answer, because I need to now find a good reason for that answer to be incorrect. But I'll never just go next and move on to the next question. You got to check out the other answers as well. But the reason I chose that is because we're talking about a queue here, and the simple queue service kind of gives it away in the name, but it's a hosted message queue, and that means that it's somewhere that application servers can place a message that's then going to be processed by other application servers. So you might have a front-end web service, and it places messages in a queue, maybe a customer order or something like that, and then an application tier processes it. And that's known as decoupling, because those application tiers don't talk directly to each other. They have a queue in the middle, and that helps them to scale independently. So I think that's the correct answer. Now let's look at the others. The top one is the simple workflow service. Well, this is like a workflow orchestration service, so it's not actually a message bus or a hosted queue. We've then got the simple notification service. Well, SNS can be used for decoupling applications, but it uses topics and notifications, not messages and queues. So the wording's not quite right there. The last one is Amazon DynamoDB. Now this is a non-relational database, so it's definitely not somewhere that you're going to host a message queue. So that's the right answer, in my opinion. Let's click on check. And sure enough, that's correct. And we've got a bit of a diagram here showing you what decoupling looks like. So on the left-hand side, we've got a web tier. So this is just the architecture I was talking about a minute or two ago. You've got a web tier, you've got a queue in the middle, and then you've got an app tier. And so the web tier can place messages onto the queue, and then the app tier keeps polling the queue and checking if there are any messages waiting, and then it can process them. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be doing a few more questions in the next video.